Hi guys, welcome to Multiverse. Today we're going to take a look at the controller role, and to do so we're going to use the quantum powers. Basically, you can play the controller role pretty much the same way depending no matter what power you're using, but there are subtleties with each power. So today we're going to take a look at the quantum controller, but in the long run I'll probably make videos about each controller power. But it should give you an idea, even if you're using another power, it should give you some sort of template to follow if you're struggling to play as a controller. Sadly, there seems to be a shortage of controller right now in this universe online, and it's very easy to understand why. Pretty much, basically, Game Update 73 was a big hit for controllers. It nerfed controllers quite a lot. So a lot of people who were playing controllers decided to give up on the role. And a lot of people who didn't know how to play controllers, it made it even harder for them to try to learn how to play as a controller. So basically, what you have left is pretty much only the old warhorse like me, who've been playing as a controller for a long time, and who can pretty much play controller no matter what barriers is blocking our way. And right now, Game of Day 73 is a pretty big one, but if you've been controlling for a while, it's not that big an issue. But obviously, for new players, it is a big issue. So let's take a look at that. Also, before I get started, there's this cleavage right now in the player base in how to play a controller, or how to set up your controller. There are people who have been setting up controller with vitalization for like ever. And at some point, people starting to, instead of putting their points into vitalization to be able to give out more power to the group, they're starting putting more points into power in order to be able to spam their powers more. There's a huge cleavage between the two. Depending on what you're playing, there's a plus and minuses on both sides. Personally, I'm pretty much always the only controller in the group. As a solo controller in a group, I mostly suggest to use vitalization. But again, there's this big cleavage between the player base, and there's some people who are dead set into just using power. So at the end of the day, listen to whoever you want to listen to. But personally, I stuck to using vitalizations for a few reasons. Basically, using vitalization works for me. Uh, Ideally, I would suggest try it out. Try using vitalization, and then switch your abilities to power. Try using power and see the difference and see what works for you. So enough stalling around. Let's get started. So the loadout we're going to use with this character is quite simple. We're going to use a temporal extortion, which is the group power heal. Basically, every controller power should have the group power heal in their loadout so that they can give power back to the group. I know that the role is called controller. Ironically enough, crowd controlling enemies is something you will probably do the least. As a rule of thumb, you should leave the crowd control to the tank for various reasons. The tank is the one who has to control the battlefield, and he has to control where the action happens in the battlefield. So ideally, you should leave the crowd control to the tank, and basically only use crowd control in certain situations. If you see a bunch of ads that will jump the healer, then sure, crowd control all those ads. There's a few specific times when, yeah, using crowd control as a controller would be a good idea, but it's a case-by-case basis. But as a rule of thumb, usually let the tank do the lion's share of the crowd controlling. Otherwise, if you start doing crowd control on top of what the tank is doing, you may make the job of the tank a little bit more difficult than it really has to. So in this case, so pretty much every controller power has a group power heal. Ideally, you want to have that in your loadout, because the main thing that the controller does that no one else in the game can really do is give out powers. There's a few ways to give out power if you're another role, but the giving out power is pretty much the main function of the controller. Then I'm using a singularity. There are things called debuffs, basically abilities that allows you to either in the case to reduce the defense of an enemy, or to reduce the damage an enemy makes, or to reduce the ability to heal from an enemy. So you have those debuffs that the controller has. In this case, the debuff I'm using is singularity, and it reduces enemy defenses. Well, actually, I'm using a few debuffs, so we'll go through all that in a bit. The next thing I'm using is Event Horizon. Basically, it's a supercharge, it's also a shield, it's a group power heal also, and you can use it while you're controlled. Basically, what it does is that it casts a shield around yourself and 7 other players. So basically, it shields the whole group from damage, and also it restores power over time. So it's one of the other abilities you have as a controller to be able to give some power to the group. Then there's Anomaly. For this one, I'm using it for 2 reasons. The first reason is that it reduces the target's ability to heal. There isn't that many NPCs that can heal themselves in this universe online. So sadly, reducing the ability to heal is something that's a case by case basis. It's very rare that you're going to really need that. But the thing I like about Anomaly is it's a great crowd control. So basically I use it pretty much as a crowd control, and once in a while the ability to prevent the target to heal comes in handy, but 99.9% of the time I just use it for crowd control. And also I use it, as you can see, it's a supercharge generator. So the more I use this power, the more it will allow me to regenerate my supercharge faster. So basically, it will allow me to possibly cast Event Horizon a little more often than I could otherwise. There's Quantum Tunneling that I love for various reasons. First, it's a shield that protects your character. Also, it allows you to go a little bit faster from point A to point B if you need to. Like if you need to go to a console really fast, this pretty much teleports you a little closer to your target if you need to. Or if you need to go to a fallen player who needs to be raised, to be raised. And sorry about that. And last but not least is Warp Barrage. That's the last of my debuffs that I need. Basically, it reduces the target's damage output. So when you cast that on an enemy, the enemy will do less damage, basically. So basically, I'm using all 3 debuffs. I'm using the defense debuff that reduces an enemy defense. I'm using the healing debuffs that reduces the ability to heal to an enemy. Although I'm using it mostly as a crowd control, but I will show you in a bit what it actually does. And I use Warp Barrage, which reduces the damage output, which reduces the amount of damage an enemy will make. There are basically every role has pretty much 2 of each debuffs. Like if we look through the abilities, like here we have the reduced defense here, but there's also another ability that reduces the defense, which I forget right now. Okay, and there's oh no, that's the one. Okay, here we have a Gravity Bomb, which also reduces the target's ability to heal, and it also stuns enemies. But personally, I prefer to go with Anomaly because of the crowd control Anomaly does, and again, Anomaly is also the supercharge generator. So that's why I chose Anomaly instead of Gravity Bomb. There's a Alcubierre Wave, which reduces the target's damage output. But again, I preferred to use a Warp Barrage instead. You could use either, but it's a personal preference for me. And also there you see there's a Time Shift, which reduces enemy defense. But again, personally, I prefer to use a Singularity because Singularity also works a bit as a crowd control, although Time Shift would probably do the same as well. But personally, I kind of prefer Singularity. It's a matter of personal preference. If you prefer to use Time Shift, that's fine too. And for the supercharges, basically I always go with the one that has a group power heal. So it's a shield that shields the whole group, which in certain situations, when you time it properly, you can pretty much save a group from wiping with your shield. And also it's a group power heal. If at some point you somehow run out of power for reasons, and you need to give power back to the group still, that could work really well to be able to help you give power to the group. It's not that the other supercharge aren't good. Closed loop, I kind of like it. But basically, Event Horizon allows you to shield the whole group as opposed to just shielding your one character. So for that alone, I thought it was worth it. And also the fact that it actually gives power to the group is also a great thing. And also, let's take a quick look at the abilities, I guess. So personally, as a controller, I would strongly suggest, oh, I still have a few skill points. I would strongly suggest to go for the super powered focus. The super powered focus will gives you 25% to your power regeneration. So you will regenerate your power much faster, which will be much needed when you need to give power to the rest of the group, or if you need to cast a whole bunch of things like the debuffs, or other things like the quantum tunneling. Also, I would strongly suggest the first thing you do, you purchase the critical power chances. You can put up to 20 points into it. So I would strongly suggest put all 20 points into critical power chance. Then put 10 points into critical power magnitude. So basically this will allow the critical power chance will allow you to do a critical more often. And the critical power magnitude will mean that your criticals will give out even more power. And as I mentioned, personally, I go for vitalization. I'm still an old war horse who still put his points in vitalization. But as I mentioned, there's school of thought who somehow really wants to put their points into power instead. The reason for that is that it allows them to spam their powers a bit more. It increases the ability to regenerate power a bit more, and a few things like that. But basically, I go for vitalization because it allows me to give more power to the rest of the group with my character. And we may as well assign the 2 points we still have. And as you can see, the maximum points you can put into vitalization is 195, or most of the top ones that's the maximum you can put in. So let's try out a few powers. I will show you somewhat what they do. So basically, the group power heal pretty much only gives power to the group. And also, you can see underneath, if you look at the multiverse at the top of the screen, and then underneath, you see that little green target. It means that as long as the green target is there, weapon attack will do extra damage. So basically, you allow the rest of the group to do extra damage, and you give also power to the rest of the group. And you can see I do a whole bunch of critical. Whenever you see the orange bubble with crit, it means that I'm doing a critical and giving out power. That's not the group power heal that does that. That's the power over time. I'm going to go into that in just a second. Actually, I should start that right now. Basically, what you want to do as a controller, you want to activate what is known as the power over time. Basically, what it does is that it gives power to the group every 5 seconds. So over time. So as time passes, every 5 seconds, you give a bunch of power to the group. And it lasts for 25 seconds if I'm not mistaken. So every 5 seconds, for 25 seconds, you will give power to the group. So whenever you use any superpower, let's use Singularity. Like you can see underneath the multiverse, you see a little green lightning bolt that appears. That means that I'm giving the power over time to everyone in the group. Although that's not quite true. Basically, group members have to be in range of your character in order to be able to do so. The range can be pretty large. Within a pretty large room, if your teammates are in line of sight of your character, like if you can see your teammates in a room, odds are they're close enough to your character. So whenever you're going to cast a power, it will activate the power over time for them. There are exceptions to that. Like if you have a teammate that's hiding behind a column and you try to give power to him, you're not going to be able to. So sadly, as a controller, you have to keep track of everything. You have to keep track to the amount of power that every member of the group has. You have to keep an eye on the minimap or even to the screen in front of you in order to be able to see where everyone in the group is, so that you don't end up trying to give power to someone who's hiding behind the pillar. Because if you try to give power to if you try to give power to someone who's hiding behind a pillar or something, you're going to end up draining your power bar for no good reason. So you have to make sure that everyone is within line of sight of your character, and that nothing is blocking between you and the character you want to give power to, in order to give them some power. So again, whenever you cast any superpower, you can see that there's the little green lightning bolt, and roughly that tells you that you should be given power to the rest of the group. Again, they have to be within line of sight of your character in order to be able to do so. So we're going to take a look at the defense debuff now. So again, whenever you use powers, there's the green lightning bolt. But if you look under sparring target, you see that little red shield that appears. So that's what Singularity does. It does put the defense debuff on a single target. So the target that you are targeting is the only one that will have the debuff. If we look at the other one, it doesn't have the debuff. So even if, as you can see, oh, it didn't do it this time. Oh, yeah, it did. So even if the inability affects multiple targets, only one target actually gets the debuff. And as a rule of thumb, you're not really supposed to debuff every single ads that you see in a mission. Like if you see a group of 12 ads, obviously you're not supposed to debuff them. Normally those ads should die pretty quick. What you really want to use your debuff on is on bosses. Whenever you see a boss, then you can try to keep the debuff on the boss as much as you can. Of course, sometimes you're gonna have to make choices. That's the hardest part about playing a controller, is that you have to make choices. Sometimes you have to make choices into either using your debuffs, or if you're in a group that's very power hungry, that needs a lot of power, you may decide, okay, I'm not going to use debuff this time. I'm going to focus only on giving power to the group, because the group is really power hungry right now, and they need every bit of power I can give them. So you're going to have to make choices. You're going to have to read the battlefield. You're going to have to be able to understand what is going on and to make a decision on what is the best thing you can use. So the Supercharge Event Horizon, I will show you what it does. Basically, let's burn a bit of power if we can. I can't. Anyway, so basically Singularity will recreate a shield like what you're seeing right now. I had both my shields for half a second. Right, this is pretty much a shield you get from Singularity. So it shields the whole group. It pretty much creates a shield similar to the shield you get with quantum tunneling. But in addition to protecting yourself and everyone in the group, it will also give out powers when you use it from the Supercharge Event Horizon. And the other one is, this here is the healing debuff. I'm not sure why it didn't work. So as you saw, there was something between me and the target. It didn't seem to want to work. So you can see the little red heart underneath the sparring target at the top of the screen. That means that the healing debuff is applied to that little guy. And again, even though both targets are affected, when I switch target, you can see that only one of the target has the healing debuff on them. Again, only the target that you're targeting actually get the healing debuff. If you want to put the healing debuff on every target, you have to do it on every target. It's pretty much that simple. So right now they both have the healing debuff. So I showed you quantum tunneling, but let's take a look again. Basically, it allows you to pretty much teleport across the stream, across the map. And also it puts a shield on your character to protect it. It's probably my favorite ability. Why would you want to have a shield? Basically, whenever you need to sometimes raise a fallen player, you want to have a shield around your character to try to help not being interrupted. Like sometimes you're trying to bring back a fallen player and you get hit by an attack by some evil NPC. Well, if you have your shield around you, the shield will protect you from those attacks, so it will allow you to raise the fallen NPC. Or sometimes if you need to activate a console or something like that, again, the shield will protect you in order to be able to do that. And last but not least is the attack debuff. So as you can see underneath the sparring target, there's a little red targeting thingy. It means that the attack debuff is applied on that NPC. And if you really want to, you can apply all debuffs on a single target if you really need to. As a rule of thumb, you don't really need to do that. Usually you only need the defense debuff, sometimes the attack debuff. So the defense debuff is the one you're going to use most of the time. Once in a while, you will also use the attack debuff. And once in a long while, you will use the healing debuff. Although, as you can see, the healing debuff is great to do some crowd control. So 99% of the time, I use it as a crowd control more than as a healing debuff. And also, normally it's supposed to help you regenerate your supercharge a little faster. So you can see my supercharge. seems to recharge a bit faster if I use the Supercharge, because it's also the Supercharge Regenerator. So if I use my healing debuff, well, it also acts as the Supercharge generator. So basically I'm using that healing debuff because it does a whole truckload of things by itself. It recharges the Supercharge, it debuffs the enemies, but even better, it crowd controls the enemies. So it's a multitask tool that I really enjoy using. So now that you've seen the powers in action, let's go through the loadout one more time. So again, temporal extortion allows me to give power back to the group, in addition to the power over time. So usually what you want to always have the green lightning bolt in the corner. So at the very least, every 25 seconds, you should cast a no power. If you're not sure, just wait and wait and wait. And at some point, you'll see the lightning bolt disappear, then you cast another power. Ideally, you don't want to wait 25 seconds. If you want to, at most, you want to wait maybe 22 seconds, and then you cast it again. I know it doesn't seem that obvious at this point. Odds are, early on, when you're just starting controlling, sometimes you're going to forget about the green lightning bolt. It happens. But ideally, early on, whenever you see that it disappears, just cast any power and bring it back. And after a while, you will master the what used to be known as the double take. It's not really a double take anymore, but basically at some point you will know when to cast it before the lightning bolt disappear. And as a rule of thumb, odds are you're going to be using various other powers, so you shouldn't have too hard a time keeping the green lightning bolt. If you're using powers a lot, it will pretty much keep the lightning bolt up by default. So basically, just using your powers should allow you to keep the lightning bolt up. But again, if for some reason you decide to attack with your weapon and you see, oh, the green lightning bolt disappears, well, just cast any power and it will bring it back. And again, you want to keep the green lightning bolt going because this is the main ability you have that will give power back to everyone in the group. And then the next one that will allow you to give power back to the group is the group healing. And the other thing that will allow you to give power back to the group as a controller is the Supercharge. Again, it will shield everyone in the group like this, and it will also give power back to everyone in the group for a short while. So again, the temporal extortion, that's our group power heal. Singularity, that allows us to reduce enemy defense, but as you saw also, it's a pretty good crowd control tool. As you can see, it can juggle enemies a little bit, which is one of the reasons why I love this ability so much. I just showed you the Supercharge Event Horizon. So again, it acts as it's a supercharge. It acts as a shield. It acts as a power heal and a group power heal. So again, it will protect you and 7 other players in your group. And of course, there's Anomaly, which again is a multi-use tool. It allows you to recharge your Supercharge. It allows you to crowd control enemies, assuming there's nothing between you and them. And as you see with the little red heart, it allows you to lower their regeneration. And of course, again, we have quantum tunneling, basically a shield that protects your character. And also, it's what is known as a detaunt ability. Basically, it means that once you activate this ability, usually the enemies will stop attacking you and they'll try to attack another target than you. Obviously, if you're the only target, they will still attack you. But as a rule of thumb, they should be attacking other targets, although it doesn't always happen for various reasons. But normally that's what it's supposed to be. That's what is supposed to happen. And again, last but not least, there's Warp Barrage, which acts as our damage, reduces target damage output. So again, it acts as our damage debuff. And also it does a bit of damage to your enemy and all that. But basically, what you really want to use it for is to reduce the amount of damage that the target will do to the enemy around him. It doesn't seem that obvious because roughly there are enemies that do a lot of damage, and sometimes there are enemies that will have like a huge attack once in a while. So ideally you want to time your damage. If you can keep the damage debuff up all the time, that's fine. But ideally, if for some reason you're struggling to apply the damage debuff, then you want to apply it before the enemy will do his big attack. So if you see that the enemy is about to do his big attack, you apply your damage debuff, and then he will still do his big attack, but he will do a tiny less damage than he would have, which might allow a few players to survive an attack that normally would have defeated them. And again, as a controller, you have to read the battlefield and you have to understand what's going on. It's a bit technical, so ideally at first, just worry about giving out power and about applying the debuffs. And as you gain more experience, everything else will start to you'll start to understand a bit more how to use your controller. But in the long run, you're gonna have to make decisions. You're going to be the decider. So you're going to have to look at what is happening and decide, okay, do you focus on giving power? Do you focus on doing the debuffs? Or can you do everything? Like when things go well, when you're in a good group, you can do everything. You can give out power, you can apply all the debuffs, you can do a bit of crowd control, and you can even do a bit of damage. When things go well, you can do everything. You're pretty much a jack of all trades when things go well. But sadly, sometimes things don't go very well. Sometimes you'll be in a group where everyone is very power hungry, where some players will consume a lot of power. So when that happens, you're gonna have to make decisions. You're gonna have to decide maybe not to do any crowd control and focus a bit more on giving out power. And with groups that are really, really power hungry, you may decide not even to cast debuffs, no crowd control, and just give out power. It's a once in a while thing, but it does happen. So basically, you have to decide within the group that you're with, do they need a lot of power? Do they need you to debuff enemies? Do they need you to do a bit of crowd control? Depending on the group you're with, you're going to have to make decisions. So you're not always going to be playing your controller the same way all the time. You're going to have to adjust to what is happening during the mission. But again, that's the kind of stuff that will happen once you gain more experience as a controller. So again, early on, focus on giving power to the group. Focus on maybe doing a bit of debuffs, and that should do the trick. And if you can save the group with a group power shield, with a group shield like Event Horizon, even better. And again, this is the quantum loadout, but pretty much any controller power will have a similar loadout. Every controller power will have a group power heal. Every controller power will have an ability that reduces enemy defense. Almost every group power will have like a shield that gives a group power heal. I think the exception to that is the gadget controller. We're gonna see about that when we discuss the gadget controller. And again, every controller power will have a group an ability that reduces the target's ability to heal. Almost every controller have a shield ability. Although in the past, gadget didn't have a shield. Now they have a few ability that acts as a shield, even if they're not really shield. Again, it will make more sense when I actually make a video about the gadget controller. But as a rule of thumb, every controller power has a shield-like ability, and every controller power has an ability that reduces the target's damage output. So even though it's not the same abilities, it's not the same name, these type of abilities are, every controller has these type of abilities. So basically, you can create this loadout more or less with every controller, but there are subtle variations with each. Which is why, in the end, I will try to make a video about each controller power so that you guys understand what I'm talking about. But roughly speaking, if you follow this template, like the group power heal, the reduce enemy defense, the shield group power heal, that is also a supercharge, the reduce target's ability to heal, the shield for your character, and the reduce target's damage output. If you follow this template with pretty much any controller power, you should be able to do fine. And again, when I get the chance, I will try to do the very same video with all the powers so that you can see the specifics of each power. But right now, if you want to play controller, even if you don't play quantum, you should be able to get more or less how the controller power works, even if it's not quite the power you're using. So anyway, so that's pretty much it for now, guys. I will make follow-up with each power also, not just with controller, but with DPS, with tank, and with healer. But obviously there's a lot of powers, so doing every role with every powers will take some time. And also there's a few powers that I'm not as... The quantum controller is pretty much one of the powers I've played the most. Technically, the power I've played the most in DC Universe Online is the mental controller. That one I played way more than anything else. But I decided to start with the quantum controller because that's what I've been using lately. So it's one of those powers that I understand the most, that I'm more familiar with. So I thought I'd start with this power. But there's a few powers like the rage tank. I'm still struggling to figure out exactly how the rage tank works. So there's a few powers and a few role that I still need to learn myself how the power properly works before I can even start to explaining it to you. So that's going to be it for now, guys. So as always, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.